Understand Mr. Wood is on his way back to town, may not make the meeting, so.
Not together.
But they're not together, no. So, Mr. Hanson, would you like to make your first presentation?
Sure, I appreciate that. And Vice Mayor, members of council, we're going to start out with a request that Mr. Moss has asked that we put together, but I think it's of interest to everybody here in the viewing public, and that is to talk about our long-term debt and projections. And so Patty Phillips, our Director of Finance, and David Bradley, our Director of Budget and Management Services, and their teams have prepared today's briefing. So with that, take it away.
Welcome, Patty.
Patty.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor and members of council. We are going to review some of these things you've seen before. Some of them are just simply updates from previous, and try to be comprehensive. In your package on Friday, there were a lot of pieces. The debt management program, talk about the pension liability, some of the Moody's information, as well as there was an interesting chart that Mr. Moss had suggested to kind of compare the trend line on health care with pension costs. And of course, the only reason pension is not bigger is because employees are now picking up 5%. So that's just all rolled into some of the background as we go into this. We're going to go over the outstanding debt, and that's primarily the bonded debt. Some information from our rating agencies, some comparisons to some of the other AAAs we were able to locate. What is our policy indicators? Where do we stand? A little bit about a very, very high level pension costs and other liabilities. The TIP fund, what that capacity is. And then at the last chart it talks about, well, after we've addressed the CIP, what additional capacity might we have? And so with that, we'll get started. And this is a sort of like my simple chart about debt. There's two, if you just remember, there's two basic types of debt. That which is supported by taxes and that which is supported by fees. And the fee-supported debt is usually our enterprise, water and sewer, stormwater. And then tax-supported has two broad types. Our general obligation bonds, which are full faith and credit, have the highest credit rating, and then appropriation-backed debt, which is subject to annual appropriation, which is not full faith and credit, and so as a result will be rated just what we call a notch below generally. And usually those are going to be lease purchase agreements. You hear about someone's wanting to do a lease, as if it's better, it's not better. And then public facility revenue bonds. So with that, we will. And as a reminder, under the GO charter bonds, we have in our charter, we can issue without a referendum 10 million plus whatever we retired in principal in the prior year. So we authorized, and 59 million was last year. Okay, here we are. Just as a recap, we have our general obligation, our public facility revenue bonds, our ARP, and we also have our water and sewer and our stormwater. All debt, all bonded debt is $1,227.7 million. When you reduce it for the fee-supported debt or other self-supporting debt like ARP, our net tax-supported debt at the end of June 30, 2017 is $927 million. And we like to pride ourselves. We think that our debt profile here is simple, straightforward. If you go to other communities, you're going to see more complex instruments, derivatives, and so forth. That is not part of Virginia Beach's portfolio. If anyone should ask you, we do not participate in any kind of swaps and other forms of derivatives. Just as a snapshot, what have we been doing with our debt? And see, a good chunk is schools. General government is, of course, a little over half. Stormwater at this point is less than, it's roughly 3.5%, a small piece of our total outstanding debt, and water and sewer are about 17%. Debt service. I want to focus on the bottom half of this page. An FY18 budget, which we fully expect that we will not exceed. We know what our debt is. We know what our debt service is. There's not a whole lot of estimating in our budget piece. Principal and interest of all types of debt is $155.9 million. Almost $100 million of that is retirement of principal. And that's another good point, as well as that the agencies are impressed that we have what they call rapid repayment of principal. Just as we haven't had any bond issuance so far this calendar year, but last calendar year, we issued $232.5 million. We had GO, we had public facility, we had water and sewer. We also have $115 million in refinanced bonds. In other words, when we see an opportunity where we can reduce the interest rate, we jump on it as soon as we can. We saved $21 million over a 15-year period with that refunding, and we retired $104 million in GO, public facility revenue bonds, water and sewer, and stormwater bonds last year. And just as a side note, I was looking at the interest rates in the market today, and looking at what our last GO bond rate, true interest cost, 2.44%, and that's probably what we would get today, or certainly no higher than that today. But we all know that the conventional wisdom is that interest rates are expected to rise into 2018. So we cleaned up, we refied everything we were able to while the market was low. The rating agencies, this is what they say about Virginia Beach, among other things. They write a lot of things, but it's kind of boil it down. You know, as you all know, we've had 8 consecutive years of AAA by all 3 of the major rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, and Standard & Poor's. In fact, Moody's recently did an issuer comment and confirmed the city's strong economy and tax base, healthy financial position, and sound financial management. Labeled us excellent financial management practices and extremely strong capacity to meet financial commitments. And of course, we all know that translates into low interest rates for us, and we've enjoyed that over the last several years. This is just a chart to kind of remind you that the type of debt will often determine what your rating will be. The GO is the highest. You can see all AAAs. Subject to annual appropriation debt is generally going to be the notch below, and there's your AA pluses, AA1s. Water and sewer, Standard & Poor's and Fitch actually rate them AAA, that fund, and Moody's AA1. In stormwater, we are below, on the Moody's, the AA2, which is more like a straight AA, and Fitch provided a AAA on our stormwater bonds. This is sort of a recap as well. This, you know, they're starting to publish more rating criteria. It used to be more of a black box. You don't know what they were looking at, but now they're the economy, the tax base, including your real estate, your personal property taxes. Where are you getting your money, including sales? But how are those tracking? Your finances, fund balances are very important as a percent of revenues. Cash balances are also important. The operating history of your management, institutional framework, how much flexibility do you have? I think that the city manager prior had been here quite a number of years. Current city manager had been here for a number of years before, so they're seeing that continuity of service that makes a big difference in the long run. Debt and pensions, net direct debt to full value is a calculation they do, and also net pension liability to full value. So those are sort of a nutshell of those criteria. They did do, Moody's did an analysis of the region in terms of potential flood risk, and you might remember you've seen this before. And just to kind of put it in a summary of their full report, they reiterated the conservative financial management and economic strengths that benefits the region. They also see the importance of regional coordination at the state and federal level to lessen that burden. They see land use planning, building codes, capital investment, and infrastructure do play a role in mitigating this risk, and we also commented on that, the fact the city's got the Dewberry study that's underway of the 4 major watersheds in the city. So just to kind of reiterate that it is on their radar screen that the flooding is an issue. This is our debt management policies. I know you all have heard these many times before, but annual debt service to general government expenditures, no greater than 10%. We're currently at 8.3, and as you will hear in a few minutes, that particular indicator is the most limiting indicator we have in terms of issuing our debt. That threshold will be met before almost any other threshold would be met. Overall net debt to estimated full value, our threshold is no greater than 3.5%, and we're at 1.9. Overall net debt per capita, you hear a lot about debt per capita. Our threshold's $3,000. We're currently at $2,195. That threshold will not be met before that first one that I mentioned, annual debt service to general government expenditures. And then, of course, the last one, overall net debt per capita to per capita personal income, no greater than 6.5%. We're at 4.3. This is our historical net debt per capita compared to the guideline. You see, we've changed it a few times over the years. We are currently at $3,000 per capita. And if we had had a debt issuance, say, 2 months ago, the way I often do in the spring, then that number would be more closely aligned with last year. So it really hasn't gone down. It's just we haven't issued the debt. Some of the Hampton Road cities, and this has not been updated. You saw this in April, but I just wanted to put it out there. This is total debt. We are not distinguishing here between water and sewer and any other types of debt. But just to kind of let you know that from what we gathered, the net debt per capita, Virginia Beach is certainly not at the high end of the regional scale. I think that Suffolk is quite large. Portsmouth is quite large. So these cities have other issues than we do. And they've always been higher than us. This is not a new issue. We have this full disclosure. We try to put everything out there. You know, when you have other agencies who are also issuing debt using the city's taxes, you know, it gets added. These are across the country, AAA cities that our financial advisor put together a couple months ago, and I just wanted to put it out there again. Like Denver is at $8,293. Remember, some cities have electric utilities, some have, so it's not a direct comparison. I would not, say that Denver has got a terrible debt load. I'm just saying that they're different cities, and just want to remind you of that. But it's interesting to see where Virginia Beach stacks up, just on a big picture kind of scale. We're going to talk a little bit about the CIP. You've seen this chart as well before, management services. David over here has put together this, and I just wanted to point out this is, we think, a balanced investment in various things. The stormwater is at $267.2 million now, but the total over the 6-year period is $1,591.8 million. Buildings, roadways, sewer, stormwater are important pieces of our total program. How do we pay for that? And this is an important point I wanted to make sure I left you with, is looking at general government, which is primarily going to be our GO and our public facility revenue bonds. 56.8% is debt finance. The rest is some form of cash, either from fund balance that we bring forward, or from current revenues, or perhaps from the state or federal sources. But rating agencies are, this is what they're looking for, is not heavy reliance on debt in your general government program. Water and sewer, in the 6-year CIP, there's a lot of reliance on cash. Stormwater, it's a different story. It does not have those resources. 70% is debt and 30% is cash. So just wanted to put that in perspective. While overall the program is not, the city's debt program is not heavily reliant on debt, the stormwater is. Pensions. In 2017, fiscal 17, the city and the schools together paid VRS $105.5 million. Roughly half of that goes towards unfunded liability. And I'm rounding, but at least half. At June 30, we just received a few days ago updated pension liability. City $411.1 million, or 78% funded. Schools $740.8 million, 70% funded. And we all kind of are familiar with the reasons why the schools are not a greater percent funded, and it's because the teacher pool is a statewide pool, and the General Assembly had chosen to underfund, not fund at the level recommended by the VRS Board of Trustees. Now, beginning fiscal 18, they are paying the full rates, which the governor ramped that up to get to that point. But I would say at least 22 to 24 years they had not been paying the recommended rate certified by the Board of Trustees. The unfunded liability is amortized over 26 years. The interest rate assumption is 7%, and over an investment cycle, VRS has achieved that. So, this is just a side note, and I don't mean to get too much in minutia, but the finance people do that. When I first became director, there was no unfunded liability. And it was because the interest rate assumption was much higher. And it has been brought down, and once that interest rate assumption went down, it creates the unfunded liability, and then hence the amortization that has begun. And I forget how many, 3 or 4 years ago, it was an open-ended amortization. It's now what they call a closed-end. It was always 30 years before. Now each year is a smaller number. So that's a closed period that is being amortized. Retiree health care liability, $68 million. We're roughly 50% funded, considering that we didn't even know what our liability was, say, 7 or 8 years ago. It's actually a very good ratio. There's other pooled benefits liabilities. There's LODA, the teachers' health insurance credits, group life insurance, and of course the local disability plan. The last time I calculated all of those together, it was roughly $165 million, and those rates that we pay also are amortizing that unfunded piece. I did want to also point out before I forget that we mentioned earlier about the rating agencies looking at net pension debt to full value, and that calculation for Virginia Beach is 2%, and in the criteria that is considered strong that they've issued. Okay, switching now to the TIP fund, which David Bradley and his staff prepared. This is the existing TIP fund, and I want to point out that we closed the books and the revenues were a little better than budget, so you've seen a different number than perhaps you had seen a month or so ago. So that is reflected on all these fund balances, and the Arena Infrastructure Debt Services programmed in here to begin paying in 2020. The sports center debt service that's in the CIP is also programmed to be paid in here, as well as, the basic debt service for the convention center, things that are already there. So very healthy fund balances here. As David has said often, we like to maintain 10 to 20% in some cases fund balance in these smaller funds, and this exceeds that. Kind of just taking this next, if you programmed in addition to the field house, the garage, which I think is another $22.5 million, and programming in that debt service, the fund balances still are very healthy. I think the lowest comes to $5 million at 11.6%. So still very good fund balance numbers. So there's a source for that should council decide to move forward. Let's now look at capacity. I think there were some questions about, we have our CIP, and if we stick within our guidelines, what is that capacity that we might have moving forward? And you heard me say a few minutes ago that debt service to general government expenditures is the limiting measure. It didn't used to be, but it is now. And we project out, based on this current CIP, including the sports center and parking garage, what additional capacity, and our estimates are $20 million a year for 5 years, or a total of $100 million. Now, let me just say that we are assuming here that the most restrictive indicator and the most sensitive to these assumptions is the general government expenditure number. And if we assume that it grows only 1%, and we assume an interest rate is at 4.5%, and our limit is 10%, then you get to this $20 million a year. We just kind of spread it out. That is, I know, very conservative, and I'd rather be on the conservative side. And just to kind of let you know how conservative it is, if we said, okay, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. The net debt per capita under this scenario would only be $2,453, because we've limited our debt service to 10% of general government expenditures. So we wouldn't hit that threshold, but we would hit the other one. Follow me. But then let's look at what happens if the general government expenditures grow faster. Then you probably have $35 million a year or $175 million in that same time frame. Now, am I saying that I believe this is the right number? No, I'm always going to stick with the lower number. So, sort of like, in a recap, continued conservative financial management is the key to our continued AAA. Gives us the flexibility in reacting, quality reporting, budgeting, we meet our obligations. Our financial advisor, Prag, just said, and I'm repeating what we said before, divergence from our policies would impact our credit ratings. So moving debt in different little buckets could have an impact. The TIP fund does have the capacity to do the $62.5 million to just fund the sports center and the parking garage, should council want to move that direction. The other thing I wanted to say is we're going to annually review this same kind of analysis we just did here. I'm projecting a very low growth in general government expenditures. What actually happens will be probably different. And so you may have more or less capacity depending how it actually turns out. And so we would re-estimate every year where we are with that capacity. We think that we're not overstating what you have in front of you by being conservative. And I think that does give us a lot of flexibility. Now, I went over a lot of material in a short order, so be happy to try to go into more detail should you like it.
Any questions? I think Bob and then John, okay?
No, I'm good.
You good? Okay, John?
Yeah, I did ask for this brief
Yes.
because I know I might be a minority view, but I think we should be doing a zero-based review on where we've allocated our existently programmed but not yet authorized and issued debt to see if it really complies and conforms with really what our top priorities are. I know the assessment on the flooding was before Matthew and before those neighborhoods and their reassessments were devastated and before
Yeah.
people just left the keys on the counter at their homes and builders are now going to the banks and buying the homes at, I don't know, 40, 50 cents on the dollar and then trying to flip those. Well, all that was before then, and I think that's a substantial tax base that we have basically flattened and made in some cases unsellable. And I don't think that's under an overestimation of what's happened there. So I think we need to put that in the context that that is before Matthew had such a devastating impact on our community, which could happen again.
What's a zero-based review?
You go back and look at everything that's programmed in the out years, which we haven't issued. Now in light of what we know, that debt is so limited and what our capacity is, would we really have made those choices that we made individually? If we looked at everything, would we still come to those same conclusions, knowing what a limited asset that we have going forward to address critical problems? Would we still make those same choices, knowing how much little we had at the end of the month? Would we have made those commitments at the first of the month? I think maybe we would not. But if you don't look at that, you don't know. And we tend to look at things in stovepipes, and we never went in to say, hey, as you're making this choice, you now have 90 cents less, you now have 80 cents less. And did you really make that at the end? Did you go back and look at that, knowing those out-year choices leaves you with only $20 million of additional debt you could issue? Are you comfortable with that, knowing all the other obligations out there? Would we say 77,000 square feet for an additional admin building was more important than accelerating flood? That's a question. We never have those kind of debates. Is just because a fund has capacity to issue debt against a $100 million capacity, doesn't mean just because they have money, that's the highest and best use of that capacity. It just means that without having to raise taxes. But if schools wanted to do, that was more important than renovation, there's a limited capacity to accelerate that. And those are just choices that we make, but I think we've made those unconsciously because we haven't looked at debt issuance or the debt capacity as the most limiting resources on our choices to do capital investments over the next 5 years, or even longer than that, because population growth is not going to push those numbers up. Now, you could take the point of view is, and it seems strange, that if you grow your budget $300 million more dollars, because you've raised taxes on people that have very low incomes, that you could spend more money on debt. But if you kept your income the same and didn't raise taxes on people, but lowered other expenses, and raised the percentage of your budget you did have for debt service, that you'd be penalized for that. It seems weird that you're rewarded for further impoverishing your city to enrich the city's balance sheet and borrow more money. I mean, it's just a fascinating, perverse logic that goes on there, because you would think just the opposite, because that's what you would do at home. Reduce debt cost, but if you change it, your income stayed the same and your balance sheet, it's the cash flow that makes, because they want to know how well they can get repaid, right? That's really their point of view. So it seemed kind of strange. So I do think now that we really do need a discussion as we go forward. You see how little debt we have to issue for something not programmed, meaning things we have already collectively voted on. Then that means those choices that we make for that additional marginal debt are really important. And we need to have a comprehensive list of all the things that are out there. I know the school wants to go have another academy, with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and build some building on their property. That's not in their current program. If that's something we're going to do, that's probably more than $10 million, I suspect. But that's a pretty big lien. Where does that compete in that $20 million? If we think we want to do something more for flooding, and I think that's a higher priority than it currently is, well, okay, what does that mean? And so I think this is, at the retreat, to my peers, I think this is a big discussion topic, because it really is going to limit our appetite, because we've already spent all but $100 million on a conservative basis of our debt capacity over the next 5 years on things that we have already said collectively as a majority that we want the city manager to go and pursue. That's historically relatively low capacity. It means we can't even have a bond referendum. If the public wanted something, we've kind of like crowded out that choice. Because even if we raised our taxes, it's still debt issuance, it still raises that percentage for debt. So we're even denying the public the choice to have a referendum and to decide they want something, because we crowded out those choices. I don't know that we've consciously understood that, but we have. And I just think that's why I asked for this. I think there's some good news in here. There's a lot of good news about stuff that we do. But my point of asking this wasn't the good news about stuff we do, but the choices that we make and the opportunity cost of those choices, giving our very small capacity on this estimate, and population isn't going to buy us much. And depending on what happens with revenues, they can grow. But once again, our need to address flooding is huge, a big liability. And it says over the next 5 years, there isn't much that we can offer people but hope that we don't get a hurricane. That's, hope's not a strategy. And that is my concern. I think that is, I appreciate this report very much. I'll be looking at this more detail. But I think Suffolk, in part, the reason why they're rated high is their anticipation for growth of revenues. And like you buy stock is always based on future earnings. And I think they're getting their rating based on their future relative to what their small debt capacity is. So I think that explains it, whereas Norfolk and Portsmouth are more legacy communities, do not have great capacity for growth going forward, and their debt represents their inability to move their incomes very much. I think that's my humble assessment, but I think that's
I'm
pretty
sure
close
that's
to
part of
accurate.
it, yeah.
But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
And before I move on, I did want to recognize Stacy Hirschberger, who helped a lot on this. Of course, David and Kevin Chatelier helped. And Andrew Oliver is our new debt administrator, and he is not here today, but I wanted to recognize him as well. A lot of back and forth in terms of projections and analysis were involved here.
Really good report,
think-
Patty.
Thank you.
I think Ben had something.
Yeah.
Yes, Ben?
John, I just wanted to make the clarification to make sure that you understand, with your comment about the hurricane and hoping that we don't have a hurricane. None of the fixes that we're making and none of the fixes that you proposed would prevent flooding during a hurricane. Are you
I have
aware
said
of
that on many
Well,
occasions.
the way that you just said it didn't make it sound like you understood that.
I have said that on my Facebook. I said that publicly at many meetings. All we're doing is giving people a 10-year standard,
Correct.
but it may make the difference on the tidal flooding, whether or not their
But
home
you do
floods or the street.
understand that a hurricane
Ben, I have said
is-
that,
Okay,
correct.
well, just the way that you said it, it didn't sound like you understood.
I understood.
So you do understand?
I do understand.
Okay.
I do understand we're subjecting people to 1 in a 10-year chance of having their yards or house flooded. I do
Got it.
understand
I
that.
don't know about you two, but I pray every night we don't have another storm.
So do I. I know
I use
people who
my
call me
prayers.
when they call, their kids are afraid their house is going to flood when it rains.
All
I'm
right,
sure you've gotten those calls.
Patty, I thought it was interesting that our total net tax-supported debt has gone down since 15,
Right.
fiscal year 15, from $1,024,000,000 to 927. So I guess that indicates to me that we've got less debt service and we're spending more money on general operations. Is that what that means? or-
There's probably a lot of factors, but the biggest thing is normally I have a spring bond sale of, say, $60 million, and we did not do it this spring.
Okay.
I felt that our capital cash that we had we were not in need of cash. So I postponed that bond sale, but if we had had it, I think our debt would be right back up.
Well, but with $60 million, you'd still be down from 2000.
Yeah, and there's probably some public facility revenue bonds, maybe of another 25, 30, yeah.
Yeah,
But if
Another
you look,
100.
There has been some shift to general operations as we
Yeah.
reduce debt service. You are correct, Louis.
Yeah.
Small, but it's in there, a couple million.
And I think it's also looking at and projecting out where we are going with our debt indicators and trying to balance that as well.
All right, anybody other questions for Patty?
Great report. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patty, that was excellent.
Good job, Patty.
Thank you.
David, Stacy, as always.
Very nice, always.
Pick the big box score.
Yeah, I like tough choices.
So, Vice Mayor, members of council, I'd like to introduce Barbara Brinson. She is, of course, with our Parks and Rec unit, and she received a city manager's challenge with this summer's summer youth program. And so she's here to provide you some feedback on what we did with our summer youth program and to talk about the virtues and the benefits of remaining involved in this kind of an effort. So Barbara, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dave. So Vice Mayor, members of council, manager, and staff, good afternoon. I am here, as Dave said, to talk with you about the Summer Youth Employment Program, City of Virginia Beach Summer Youth Employment Program. Before I get into the actual details of the program, I'd like to introduce you to the staff who really make this possible day to day. They're the ones who are doing the grind. On the computer over there is Betsy Parsons, who's our administrative assistant. And then Andrea Holloman is our newest staff person who was hired specifically to work with the Summer Youth Employment Program. And then, of course, we have Nikki Vasquez, who's overseeing it all. Nikki also works with the Mayor's Youth Leaders in Action. So this is our team. And Michael's no stranger to any of you, of course. Okay. So I'm going to talk with you about the Summer Youth Employment Program and some of the strategic alignments that we have, give you a historical overview, and bring you up to date to where we are now, and then end with a video. Okay. So participation in the SIEP is an opportunity for youth ages 16 to 21 who live in the city of Virginia Beach to gain work experience in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors, learn new skills, earn, and save money. So that's what it's all about. We should say gain meaningful work experience, because that's what we're expecting them to do. They benefit largely, but I have to tell you that the departments or the sites to where they are assigned benefit as well, because these young people do a tremendous job. So keep that in mind. And conversely, it also provides opportunities for our members to really get involved in youth development, because we believe there's a role for everyone to play, and that's a role that we're playing there. So someone once said, and we'll name him today. I, like many citizens, have a passion for ensuring that Virginia Beach is an ideal place for future generations, a real community for a lifetime. Of course, that was our mayor. So these strategic initiatives are designed to move us forward toward achieving that vision. And we think the Summer Youth Employment Program is also a strategy to get us to that vision. So just think, if you don't understand finances, it's difficult to be financially fit. So we incorporate an educational piece, a financial education piece, and we've expanded that over the years. I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. So just think, we're introducing these young people to public service. Many of them have no idea the types of jobs that are in our city, and so this is an opportunity for them to see that as well. In terms of opportunities to learn and grow, we're hoping that growth is happening on all sides, with our young people as well as with those who are supervising them. And of course, we're growing the local economy. In terms of the safest city, there's a lot of research that lets us know that young people who are involved in positive activities are less likely to be involved in negative activities. And the Summer Youth Employment Program is certainly something that keeps them busy and helps them develop. The 40 developmental assets are our framework for youth development, where we make sure young people have the skills, the experiences, the relationships with the adults to really help them grow and develop into contributing adults. So look back. This Summer Youth Employment did not begin this year. We've been doing this for a number of years. In 2009, I believe, the American Recovery Reinvestment Act afforded many localities, including Virginia Beach, and through many entities, additional funds to do things. And so some of that money came through the city. Human Resources did a Summer Youth Employment Program via Opportunity, Inc. The Community Criminal Justice Board also got funds. And we submitted a proposal, and they were gracious enough to fund our proposals for us to do a Summer Youth Employment Program. And so we did, and for a number of years, we got that funding. The issue is that we never really knew if it was going to come or when it was going to come. So it was difficult to plan for the program. In 2013, I actually called Bob Mathias, and I see he's on the agenda today, to say, Bob, are there funds available? Bob said, no, but he put me in touch with someone who told us about the U.S. Conference of Mayors National Summer Jobs Challenge. And so for us, we decided that we would ask the mayor to invite the businesses in, because we had no money coming in from the city, the businesses in and invite them to be a part of a summer jobs challenge. And we did. We had a breakfast. They came, and some of them actually hired our young people. So moving on, 2015, we still had some of those juvenile assistance grants money. Oh, by the way, the Community Criminal Justice Board funds, we were in that, we challenged ourselves with hiring those young people who were court involved, as well as those who lived in what we called our more challenged communities. So that's who we were serving. So moving on through private companies, and in 2015, Parks and Recreation put up a chunk of money where we placed young people in Parks and Recreation. 2016, we're still kind of struggling there. Where's the money going to come from? We were given permission to ask city departments to hire young people, pay the salaries, and we did the upfront work and actually supervised and assisted them with that. So that's where we were. Now, moving forward, we're not the only game in town. We have a wonderful summer youth employment program, but we're not the only game in town. The city of Norfolk has been doing this for years. They've been doing it over 10 years, and every year they place money in their operating budget to run the summer youth employment program for 260 kids. Newport News is fairly new. They started doing it 3 years ago, allocated $1 million. This year increased it by $500,000. Trying to serve 600 participants. That's not always easy. So, as I mentioned, we've been administering it for years, but kind of on a whim, not always knowing where the funding's going to come from. But now we are among many cities nationwide, and particularly in the region, who actually fund our summer youth employment program. So we're excited about that. So Virginia Region's summer employment program today. We have money in the budget that pays for the youth salaries. Exciting. We hired Andrea, who was already with the Department of Parks and Recreation, but now she's in the Youth Opportunities Office and doing a fine job. We also got funding for job coaches who will go out and visit the job sites and making sure that the young people are doing what they need to do, addressing any issues that they need to address, and overall supporting the supervisors. Those who work for the first time make $7.50 an hour. Those who have been with us in former years make $8 an hour. They can work up to 35 hours weekly. Those who are that we work with private companies, the private companies actually pay those salaries. We don't pay them, but we work with them in terms of screening, interviewing, and placing them in the private companies. So program overview. How does it all work? As of this year, every young person who applies for a job applies through our city system. Bit challenging this year because we were working out the kinks in our own system. So hopefully next year we will have those worked out. Every young person has an interview. They have to have references. They must have a resume, whether or not they've had a job. We work with and partner with our Opportunity, Inc. Youth Career Center, and they do career and personality assessments for us, and they have to do an essay. Then anyone who's accepted has to go through orientation, where they learn their workplace readiness skills, and as I indicated, we've got that financial component included in that. We then take what those young people have said are their interests. We take what we know, the jobs that are available, and we consider other things, and we try and do our best to match them to the skill or the job that they want to do. Not always successful with that, but we do. We also consider transportation, because we ask that question, will transportation be an issue? And if it is, then we've worked with schools to identify schools that are close to where they live so that they can get to that job location. So that works for us. In addition, supervisors come to an orientation, so we have a shared understanding of the roles and responsibilities. They know what we expect of them, and they kind of share what they expect of us as well. Included in this are our site visits, again, where the job coaches go out and talk with the supervisors as well as talk with the young people just to see if there are any issues there. Every year we have a closing luncheon, and this year it was August 11th. And really nice had it at the convention center. And also a part of the program, large part of the program will always be evaluations from the participants as well as the supervisors. So 2017, we got in 188 applications and conducted 105 interviews for that. From that, we had 86 young people involved in the Summer Youth Employment Program. 71 of them were placed in city departments, and 15 went into the private sector. But what's important here is that we started with 86, and we ended with 86. And that's phenomenal. Now, it wasn't always pretty. I have to tell you that. It was not always smooth, but the fact is we ended with 86 young people, and that's exciting for us. In addition, and it has been our experience over the years that young people will either stay longer because their supervisor has asked them to stay longer. Same thing happened this year. About 4 of them were asked to stay on longer until September. But 4 were actually hired as well. 1 with Tidewater Finance Company, who's been our long-term partner, 2 with Just by 5, and 1 with our out-of-school time early childhood program. So that's exciting. It's said that they're getting the skills, they bring skills, they're developing those skills, and they're doing what they need to do, and folks want them to stay on. So we're excited about that as well. We just received our final surveys today, so I don't have those numbers for you, but I do have a couple of comments. I won't read them all to you. But the first one, she's been the most productive summer intern in the past few years. We were able to assign higher level tasks based on her ability with little supervision. I would love to have her back. That's what we want to hear. We will try and get that young person, if he or she comes back, we try and get them matched with that company. And the comment at the bottom is from a youth worker who says, being in the SIAP helped me improve my financial management and professionalism by giving me a real-world sense that everything matters, from the clothes you wear to how you interact with people. So he got it. He got it. Takes a long time for some of us to get that, but he got it. So now you're looking at where our young people were placed. Again, 71 were placed in city departments, and that's where you see them there. And 15 in the private companies. And I was just doing the numbers. It looks like 43% of the city employees worked at Parks and Recreation sites. Now, while we're excited about that, because Parks and Recreation can accommodate it, but it also means that there's a lot of capacity throughout other departments to get young people placed. And so that's what we're going to be looking at next year. I mentioned that we have incorporated a financial component, and we take it really seriously. Years ago, when the Bank On program started with that's operated under Human Services, we partnered with them to bring that component into the Summer Youth Employment Program. And so some of the things that they've been involved in a savings plan this year through the Young America Saves program / Virginia Saves program. Our young people were provided with incentives over the summer if they participated and completed certain modules, if they tweeted over the summer about different activities. And some of them, as a result, actually received gift certificates at the end of that. The Cities for Financial Empowerment is a foundation under the City Corporation. But we applied for a technical assistance grant back in the spring and received it. And we have an opportunity next year to apply for a $20,000 grant under them, which we hope we can use for jobs. But their focus really is to help us identify various touch points throughout the Summer Youth Employment Program and throughout the year where we can make sure that young people are still connected to the financial components that they learn. We have a video. I'm going to save that to the last. So your next slide just looks at our partners. There are a number of them, and there's no way we could do this without them. We don't even want to. We believe in partnerships. We like partnering. And so these are our partners, and we know that they're going to grow over the years. Some of them actually come in and do workshops in the orientation. Some of them work with us throughout the year. So looking ahead, this year we can actually get an early start because the money is in the budget. So our manager has challenged us to increase the program annually by 25% until we reach 200 positions. We're going to look at some branding opportunities. As you saw, Norfolk and Newport News, they're nice brands there, so we're going to look at some branding opportunities as well. We're also going to really concentrate on serving more of our vulnerable populations, those who are in foster care, homeless, low income, those with disabilities. So we're going to have a focus on those as well. We think there's an opportunity for some special projects, and maybe the young people will work in cohorts, maybe on art projects throughout the city. We don't know yet, but that's where we'd like to move towards. And we'll always seek alternative funding. So hopefully we'll get the $20,000 from the city corporation. If not, we'll look other ways, grant funding. And when we're going to do ongoing evaluation. But important to me is that the Summer Youth Employment Program becomes a part of the city's culture, that it's institutionalized, that we own it. It's our program, and it's our responsibility to make it work. So, I thank the city manager for accepting the proposal, and to council members for approving the budget with it in there. And now, we're going to go back to a video that was actually done by a young lady who was in the Summer Youth Employment Program. I tell you, it's about 5 minutes. Hope you can sit through it, but I think it's a good one. My name is Barbara Brinson, and I'm the Youth Opportunities Coordinator for the City of Virginia Beach. The Summer Youth Employment Program began under the Youth Opportunities Office in 2009. We knew that we wanted young people to have opportunities to work in the summer. It keeps them engaged in things in positive ways, and it gets them ready for the workforce. We have young people working this summer in our parks and recreation, our recreation centers, in our parks, our landscape services. We have them working in community policing because some of them want to be police officers. We feel as a city that's our responsibility to nurture our young people and ensure that they are prepared.
I wanted to be a part of SYUP because I need a guaranteed job, and I knew here I was going to get a good job. With SYUP, you have good, solid, dependable references, and that means a lot going forward, and it's a way for me to build my resume.
So last year I wasn't able to be placed in the police department because of my age. The job that I was in wasn't exactly the job that I wanted, but Miss Nikki promised that if I stuck with it and I did everything to the best of my abilities, that I would be placed where I wanted to next year. So I did. I stuck with it, and I applied again, and now I'm at crime prevention. To finally be placed in the crime prevention unit, it felt good. I felt like I worked for it. I felt like that I deserved to be there.
I'm a parent of 2 kids, and I can tell you it is way better for kids to seek employment through the Summer Youth Employment Program than it is going out on their own. Not only does it help them find jobs that match their interests and partner them up with what can become very easily a passion for them, it teaches them how to behave in the workforce.
Hello, how are you? Good, how are you? I'm good, thanks. SYEP gave me insight on like the job world, being on time, being able to hold conversations with people and keep them happy, like customer service.
The 11th and 12th grade, I went through a youth employment program. The same skills that happened way back in the old days are the same skills that you need today. That professional skill, the way that you treat people, the way that you handle adversity. I want to make sure that the new generation have those skills that will be there for a lifetime.
SYEP program is giving information to the youth at the time that they need it. Oftentimes when you're in high school, you're receiving financial information. You may be receiving great financial information, but it's not given to you at the time when you need it. This allows us to kind of infuse financial information right at the time when youth are going to be making some choices about their financial affairs.
My paychecks, I'll like pay myself first. I try to like save my money. Like I'm about to go back to college to get like certain things that I need or take my mom out or something.
The city is the capital. They're the people who are going to put the money into things to make it work. SYEP, they're going to create and groom these students to ultimately have a great product. And guess what that great product is going to be? It's going to be great employees. It might be a great in-city employee that comes back. It might be a great teacher that comes back and moves to the city. It might be our next mayor.
The City of Virginia Beach understands the importance of nurturing our young people. The City of Virginia Beach understands the importance of providing opportunities for young people to succeed. The Summer Youth Employment Program is an excellent example of how the city prepares its young people for life.
I'm here today because I believe this program is one of the most important programs that we have going on in Virginia Beach. Providing opportunities for our young people to find work, to be mentored, and look at the opportunities of staying here in Virginia Beach. Apple's Steve Jobs once said, "Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it."
Yeah. Beautifully done by Jeanette Lamb. Again, a young person who was formerly in the Mayor's Youth Leaders in Action, went through the Summer Youth Employment Program. So this is the kind of work that they're doing. Questions?
Any questions? Yes, Shannon.
Thank you, Barbara. How does a private company get involved and become an employer
Good
in the
question.
program?
First of all, you can call us and let us know, but our staff are calling around, asking companies if they will participate. We send them information, we follow up. So I will say this, if any of you have your own companies, private companies, we ask that you consider taking a young person as well. So you just call the Youth Opportunities Office, 0446.
385.
That's right. Yep, and we'll get you started. And we're starting early because now is the time to really get started on it.
Any more questions, or? Thank you very much. That was excellent
Thank you.
presentation.
Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so today I'm going to have Michael Calvert lead out with a discussion and a presentation about a really unique opportunity that we have to partner with HRSD and to also convert a park into a multi-use facility. And so Council Lady Abbott and Council Member Bob Dyer have been briefed on this and have kind of given us a thumbs up to come forward and inform the rest of council about an initiative. So, Michael, take it away.
Welcome,
Good,
Mike.
good to see you, Vice Mayor and Council. I hope you enjoyed the presentation on summer youth employment. I'm really excited by the good things that Parks and Recreation is doing for the community, and I think we're bringing you something else that's going to be great for the community. A lot of times we talk about win-wins, but I think this is a win-win-win-win. I think this is going to be a win for HRSD, a win from Public Utilities, a win from Parks and Rec, and most of all, a win for our constituents and citizens. I'm pleased to be here with Ted Hennepin. I want to recognize Laura Kirkwood and Gary Hart from HRSD who are joining us. I also want to thank Bob Montague, who is out on vacation, but Stephen Motley is going to be talking to you from the public utility side, and I also have Chad Morris here from our own Parks and Recreation Department. But I'm not going to steal their thunder. I want them to talk about this really exciting and innovative project we have for you guys, and then we'll stand by for questions. So, Stephen, you want to kick us off?
Thanks, Michael. As Michael said, this is an exciting opportunity, I think, to show how two agencies can work together collaboratively to produce a win situation for everybody involved, including the community. For those of you not familiar with the Hampton Roads Sanitation District, or HRSD, they provide wastewater treatment services for the majority of the South Side Peninsula and the Middle Peninsula. They operate 13 wastewater treatment plants, as you can see in the map here. They can treat about 250 million gallons a day collectively. On the average, they treat 150 million gallons a day. The city of Virginia Beach is served by two treatment plants. The Atlantic Treatment Plant, marked by the number 1, is located near Ocean Lakes High School, and the Chesapeake Elizabeth Plant, marked by the number 2, is located near Little Creek Amphibious Base at the border of the city of Norfolk. This slide here just kind of show you how the systems are interconnected and how they play an important role with each other. Both the city system as well as the HRSD system are part of a regional sanitary sewer system. What happens in one has impacts and effects on the other. One thing that's really important to point out here is that while here in Virginia Beach and the Hampton Roads area, we do have a separate system, meaning that sanitary sewer is its own system and stormwater is a different pipe network system. The sanitary sewer system is definitely impacted by rainfall and extreme wet weather events. And that's important to note because the main events as far as hurricanes will produce the peak flows in the sanitary sewer when we get a lot of rainfall or a lot of flooding. Now that I've provided you a brief overview of how the HRSD and the city system interact, we're going to talk more specifically about the specific project at hand, and that's the closing of the Chesapeake Elizabeth Treatment Plant. So beginning in January of 2022, the Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load of limits of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediments increased to become more stringent. So as a result of that, HRSD had to evaluate their options in all of their treatment plants. So for the Chesapeake Elizabeth Treatment Plant, they looked at the option of upgrading the plant to meet those new nutrient requirements. And in order to do so, it would require about $150 million to upgrade the plant to meet those new requirements. They looked at the option of closing the plant. So by closing the plant, it will allow them to save about $100 million in terms of O&M costs over the next 30 years. It also allows them to take advantage of the current extra capacity they have at the Atlantic Treatment Plant as well as through their interceptor system. Now by doing this, they'll also have to make some upgrades to their system as well as the City of Virginia Beach system to allow this diversion to be able to take place. So as I mentioned, they have to do several different projects in order to close this Chesapeake Elizabeth treatment plant and make the diversion possible. They have to increase the size of some of their interceptors. They have to produce some new interconnects between the city system as well as the HRSD system. They will have to upgrade at least 9 sewer pump stations that are owned by the city. Additional are being evaluated. And the main project here that we're here to talk about is a storage tank near their Providence Road PRS pumping station. All of these improvements are required to meet the TMDL requirements in order to facilitate the closing of the Chesapeake Elizabeth plant. The approximate cost of these improvements is about $90 million. So it's about a $60 million savings compared to what they would have to do to upgrade the treatment plant to meet the new TMDL requirements. This slide shows you a typical storage tank, or what a typical storage tank looks like. This particular storage tank is located in the city of Hampton. It's along the flight path of Langley Air Force Base. It's not near any homes. It's not near any subdivisions. It's in a kind of remote area. And so in our case at Woodstock Park, that would not be the case. We'd be located near homes in a neighborhood park. And so HRSD and Parks and Rec and Public Utilities had to kind of work collaboratively to determine what would be a better option or what would be a more innovative option to not only provide HRSD with a needed storage tank, but also provide the community with an amenity. So before I turn it over to Chad to really talk about the most interesting part of this project, I just wanted to briefly talk about the reason why Woodstock Park is the chosen location. So you can see Woodstock Park highlighted in the blue line there. If you look just to the north, you'll see a green triangle. That is the HRSD Providence Road pumping station. So it's critical that this tank be near that pumping station, near the piping. The HRSD Interceptor Piping is located in red. So the tank fill would come from the incoming into the HRSD Providence Road pumping station, and it's shown there on the north. And the tank would drain to the south on that HRSD pipe that goes along the eastern border of Woodstock Park. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chad to tell you more. But before I do, I want to point out just real quick that this storage tank is only for peak wet weather flows, so it's not something that's in use all the time. In fact, the majority of the time it's not in use, it sits there empty. So it should not cause any issues in terms of usage of the park. And I'll turn it over to Chad.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor, members of council. This is indeed where things get really innovative and exciting, especially for Parks and Recreation. Stephen did a great job, mentioning why Woodstock Park makes sense. More specifically, the best spot for the storage tank is shown here within Woodstock Park. It is in with the existing confines of the skate park and the non-programmed and underutilized ball field which reside there. This location was favorable to Parks and Recreation for multiple reasons. It would not, for one, impact the forested vegetation you see to the south. It would be located more than 500 foot away from the nearest residential backyard over in Avalon Hills subdivision. And it is also adjacent to another utilitarian facility to the north, which is the Dominion substation and the transmission lines, which traverse through the site. You also notice that the tank size, shape, location here is different than the round at grade traditional storage tank. Parks and Recreation was not necessarily satisfied with that idea or concept due to the footprint being so large and the impacts it had on the park site. And that location also, caused us, we'd have to relocate this existing skate park and do some things that would be somewhat of a challenge. So that's when the question arrived, what if the skate park were placed on top of the tank? HRSD willingly took that back to the table, began to research options for sizes, options for the tank. Can the tank be partially underground? Find ways to blend it more into the park environment. They did a great job with that. From the research, they were able to find that they were able to accommodate that, modify the shape, bury the tank maybe close to 10 feet underground, leaving approximately 10 foot above ground. But we'd be able to blend that into the park environment much more easily. Also, would the park be able to access an amenity on top of the tank? They were able to confirm that could be a possibility and be done. So the architects and engineers brought forward a concept showing where this is, what you'd see from I-64. You currently see the transmission lines and the Dominion Tower, regardless, that's there on the site anyway. Also, if you notice, the two smaller tanks behind the tower are odor control tanks. Those were just shown there for graphic representation. Those tanks could be easily moved, modified to the right, be kind of tucked in near the tree line and be hidden, but we wanted to show kind of scaling of the odor control tanks. Also, the flat portion on top of the tank you see there, it would be the skatable surface. And then if you'll notice, the the protrusions along the sides there that stick up, those are encased areas for odor control, for piping, to help with the airflow on the top of the tank. This slide here shows the existing conditions inside Woodstock Park. This is a photo from the parking lot looking with the existing skate park to the right, and in the back distance straight ahead is you can kind of see the skinned-in ball field area, and then to the left is just a small shelter. Architects took that perspective and created the rendering of what could be visualized on the park from the park site. If you'll notice the berm rising from the parking lot up to the upper level, covering the sides of the tank. So you hardly notice that, you know, there's a utilitarian function of a storage tank, 5 million gallons, you know, on the site. You see on the top elevation, you can see the facade that's on top, which is has good materials. It's not just concrete. Provides a good, that area up there is the skating plaza. And then if you also notice, there's some visualization of some shelters for shade for the users of the facility, a guard shack, and spectator seating. Also, the plaza is confined by fencing for safety and security. And then finally, this is the bird's eye perspective of what you really get a feel to see what could be put on top of the tank. Once again, the 3 linear protrusions on the tank are for the odor control system would be encased. The fenced-in area you see here is approximately 20,000 square foot of skate plaza with controlled access, guard shack for monitoring the activities. As a reference, Woodstock Park skate park currently is 18,000 square foot, so this is a little larger, and there is an opportunity where it could get slightly larger than that, depending on how the skate park really aligns. The skate park does have shaded and secure spectator seating. Parks and Recreation is also recommending that HRSD work with a skate park consultant as this concept develops, and to ensure that the flow of the skate park is great for our users. Also, these renderings you saw are very conceptual, and we look forward to the community engagement that would come forward and incorporate those ideas in as well. With the timing of HRSD's proposed project, we had to rethink our own timing of the improvements that go on within the aging Parks and Recreation infrastructure within Woodstock Park. We were already under design contract to do some things there, reworking the cumbersome drive loop, adding some additional parking in that loop, which was near some of our larger amenities in the park, and to mill and pave the deteriorating driveway and the existing parking areas. The existing park office restroom, playgrounds, park shelters, sidewalks, and other amenities, we knew we were within probably 3 to 5 years of needing a replacement regardless. HRSD's storage tank facility needs to be made by 2021. So and also for safety and the fact that there's only one way in and out of the site, and the tank construction being very heavy construction alone would require the park to be closed for 18 to 24 months. So with that kind of provided us the opportunity to look at entirely renovating Woodstock Park in conjunction with the tank and the skate park project. When the project is complete, after 2 years, we potentially have a renovated new park at Woodstock Park. Some of the major downsides to that with a park in heavy construction and park being shut down for nearly 2 years, some of the things we noticed would probably be the unavailability of the dog park. So we think we have a good temporary solution for that, where we could fence in a 10,000 square foot area over at Providence Park for the temporary time while Woodstock Park is being constructed. Really combining these resources with HRSD to renovate this park really makes good sense. Just want to take you through a couple of slides so you can get a feel for the existing features that are on site, the amenities. Upper left, the left side is the existing office restroom. That facility was built in 1986. In the upper right-hand corner is the cumbersome drive loop that has lack of parking, but it is in proximity to the larger shelters and the playground. And then the lower right photo shows some of the deteriorating asphalt in our driveways throughout the park, which is a consistent condition throughout the park. And this slide is, in the upper left is the playground system that was installed in 2001. And in the lower right is a photo of one of the large shelters, which was put in 1986. And then finally, the skate park existing conditions kind of shows we've been doing a good job with some preventative maintenance, keeping the cracks in the skating surface usable for our skaters. Crews have been doing a great job with that. This facility, skate park, was built in 2007. Honestly, we would try to get another 8-9 years out of its useful life, but this being the ideal location for the tank, this provides even greater opportunity to put the skate park on top of the storage tank, providing that win-win we're all looking for. With that, when we're trying to collaboratively work with other folks to work on a project, we need to be clear with whose responsibilities for what parts of the project are whose. And we have that listed here today. In general terms, the HRSD would be responsible for delivering, obviously, the tank, the skate park located on top of the tank, all associated equipment, any grading, berms, connecting stairways, ramps to the skate park, and then the obvious incidentals that happen during construction, where pavement and roads and things get tore up, things get banged into. HRSD would be responsible for that. Parks and Recreation obviously would be responsible for for delivering the park restroom and office building, the approximately 60 additional parking spaces, and the associated park amenities such as picnic shelters, tables, park benches, and walkways, and then the new playground. Parks and Recreation funding would come from CIP 4306, which is the open space and park infrastructure development and maintenance. $600,000 in FY18, this is current year, was already budgeted for the pavement repairs and parking lot modifications for Woodstock Park, which we were getting ready to start doing. Another $800,000 would be budgeted out of the same CIP in FY19 if we were to move forward. And then to wrap up, what are our next steps? And first of all, foremost, we need to hold some community meetings and get more information out to the communities. And then we'd move forward to spread committee. If council is supportive of the proposal, HRSD would require a land transfer or a long-term lease on a portion of the property. Investigation on which options work best for all parties is underway. We're kind of leaning that a lease option would work best, especially for the city, but that's under more investigation and is ongoing as we speak. Starting in 2018, the development of the design documents would be created in 2018. And in the background, the property transfer or lease agreements would be taking place, and then more community meetings showing the final designs and where we're at. And then hopefully starting construction in 2019 with an 18 to 24 month construction cycle, with cutting the ribbon in 20 or 21 in time for HRSD to meet their requirements. That's a lot of information, but thank you for your time. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, I think this is a marvelous example of a joint project coming together, with HRSD, the city, and, the public, and just coming together and coming up with a really innovative idea, to show that they can really, work in harmony together and produce a very, very favorable outcome for the public. This is the type of thing I should be the template for these type of deals going forward. And see if you can do one at Wayne Haven Parkway for me.
Really cool. Very cool.
Anybody else? Yes, John.
Just an observation when you come back, only because this is, I don't know if this is considered critical infrastructure or not under the federal law. I don't know if this storage tank counts as critical infrastructure. But I'd be interested, I'm sure the community would be too, on just what the redundancy is in their safety systems and your sensors for leaks, those kind of things that are behind the scenes. But when things go wrong, everyone wonders why you didn't ask the question. So I love the concept. I'm just interested in the redundancy and the safety sensors, and if they're gonna have visual observation, and just how all that safety features behind that ensures the integrity of the operation of the chemical process.
You want to talk about that?
Well, I will say that after the tank is...
And introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Laura Kirkwood with HRC, and I'm the project manager for this project. And I just wanted to say that, after we construct the tank, we would do a pressure test. So we would make sure that there were no leaks before it went into operation. So that's kind of standard procedure with our pipelines and with all of our infrastructure. And just kind of one thing to point out is the tank will be storing wastewater from a wet weather event. So it's just going to be holding this mixture of wastewater and storm water, for a short period of time, typically 2 to 3 days, and then would be pumping it back into the interceptor system to send it to our treatment plant, which is near Ocean Lakes High School. So there's not really a chemical process going on. It's just holding the water, and then it'll be pumping it to the Atlantic treatment plant.
I didn't expect to answer that, but I really would like to understand better the active, not just the initial construction, but what's the ongoing operational sensing, observation, and ensuring the integrity as you would have with any other industrial processes. You would have continuous monitoring. I'm just concerned what that is. Not today, but when you have time to do that, I would love just to see that. I'm sure I'm unique in that interest.
And my name is Gary Hart, also with HRSD. I'm the Chief of Design and Construction on the South Shore. So to address a little bit more of your concern about ongoing operation and maintenance, one of the things that, as you could tell, the ridges on this particular design, like it was explained to, that's an odor control. One of the things that we're going to be able to get inside of the tank during those periods when it's not in use to check the integrity of it, to make sure that the lining's intact, make sure all the equipment is running. As we move into this period of time, the 2021 timeframe, we're going to be looking at a smart sewer system, so we're going to have more automation and telemetry logic that will be able to actually do things from afar. So I don't know if that helps answer your
That's what I was
question.
looking for, your active monitoring. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anybody else, any other questions? Thank you very much. Very nice presentation.
Steve, Chad, Michael, thanks folks for coming out. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, Vice Mayor, members of council, we got Bob Mathias coming in. Every year we receive funds from the Jane Byrne Grant program, and we have a formalized process by which we go about and evaluate the distribution of that, and Bob heads that group up, and he reports back to the council their recommendations. And so, Robert, what are we doing?
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, this is a good news story. We've received quite a bit of funding over the years from the Edward Byrne Memorial Grant Program, but we have a system set up in Virginia Beach. We're required to have an equivalent of a criminal justice board, community criminal justice board, that we use both for juvenile justice grants and the Byrne grant. We basically get a bang for the buck. But we have this board is made up, as you can see, everybody from the criminal justice system, including some you might not think of, are like Department of Social Services, but obviously they have a lot of folks that are involved in the criminal justice system. Mental health, I think something like 60% of Sheriff Stiley's guests have mental health issues. The number is pretty high. School administration, the public defender's office, and then the Community Services Board. And so we've had this group together for a number of years. We developed a number of comprehensive criminal justice plans, and they work together very well. The Byrne grant, again, goes back to 2005, and as you can see from the next slide, we've received a total of about $2.2 million, and it's gone to pretty much all of the agencies we mentioned in the previous slide, the Police Department, Sheriff's Department, Juvenile and Domestic Relations. And I'm always very impressed and always comment on this when the board gets together. They always think outside the box and how the grants are going to help the overall criminal justice system rather than the individual agencies. And there's just such a great amount of sharing and working together on this. This year, we are recommending, and it will come to council at a later date for an ordinance, a total of $88,131, which is the amount of money that's available. And this is down from, we got close to 1 point or twice as much, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Obviously, the amount of money is going down. So we're having $41,000 for a laser scanner. I'll go into these. $35,000 for a mass arrest compound, and $12,000 for some hair and urine screen tests for the community criminal justice system. Go ahead, next, please. The laser program, it's a very neat tool, and it's basically a waterproof and eye-safe instrument that was initially a surveyor's tool, but you set it up on a tripod and it starts radiating a whole bunch of data points. And within just a very few minutes, you can get several 100 million data points. So the crash investigation, fatal crash team will use this, and also we're going to make it available to other city departments. So let's say that we had a fatal crash where a car or vehicle runs into a bridge. Not only could we investigate and get a whole bunch of information for investigative purposes about how the crash happened, but also any damage that might happen to the bridge that Public Works could use. It's a line of sight tool, and it results in a data point cloud. Let's go to the next slide. And lasers have gotten better. I wanted to do my Austin Power laser thing, but I didn't. But they've gotten more specific over the time period. Point cloud overlay with a series of photographs. So the computer systems meshes all this together, and then increased capabilities at post-production. This is a image that was generated of the fatal shooting we had not too long ago from this tool. And although it looks like a photograph, this was all from this laser machine. Please. Accurate measurements within a couple millimeters, all inclusive. Visual representation of the team, increases transparency, reduced time, and this was a real important thing. We can go in and put this instrument up, and 2 hours later they are finished with all the designs, or measurements you could ever wish to need. So it very quickly allows them to get the on-site and off-site, get the street reopened, and document a scene in its original condition, so you don't have to wait a day for daylight to come and things like that for the measurements to be made. Supplemental documentation of crime scenes, blood splatter. This is a real CSI tool, for instance. Evidence location, precise measurement, helps with sketches, courtroom presentations. So you could go in a courtroom and one of the judges or the lawyers could ask for a certain representation, and that could very quickly be put up on the screen for the jury and others to see. Shooting incident reconstruction and bloodstain pattern analysis, as I mentioned earlier. Go ahead, please. And this would help a fatal crash team. They did use a English roundabout here for some reason for their design. They're going clockwise. Evidence location, skid mark, as you can see, just all sorts of tremendous information. Please, next one. And the initial request is for a M70 fatal crash team instrument. And again, this is all-weather instrument and eye-safe. They have a older model now that they're going to try to get upgraded with money they're going to find within the department. But this instrument, they can stick out in a rainstorm, not worry about weather when they want to get the work done, and is also eye-safe. Please. Total cost of this is $43,000, and we're recommending allotment of $41,131 from the burn grant money, and the police department said they'd find the others. The other for the community corrections is basically to buy a follicle follicle test, which are about $44 a piece, and the urine tests, which are about $15 a piece. Our judges are creating demand for this evidence. A person comes in and says, I haven't used drugs for 2 months. Well, you can do a urine test and say they haven't used it recently, but a hair follicle test allows the judge, the criminal justice system, to go back several months to see if they've used any drugs back within that period of time. And this will help alleviate a shortage of this judicial created demand. Okay, next one, please. And then the third one and the last one is for a mass arrest compound. The police department and the sheriff have been working on this for quite some time. And basically, this would create a staging area down in the rec yard. and it would provide for tents, cuffing stations, restraint equipment, drones, and tablets to help ensure operational readiness and security. So let's say we went out and had a mass arrest type occurrence. We could bring everybody in, secure buses, secure transport, take them into the Sally Port. We'd have bathrooms there. We'd have the tent set up. They'd go in, get a band put on. We'd have a tablet set up so all that information could be registered, and we could securely keep those people there. We were going to try to allot some money for nets to keep drones out of the recreation yard. And Sheriff Stiley had a little story, talked about they no longer can leave basketballs out in the basketball court because not our jail, but another correctional facility somewhere else. Somebody brought a drone in at night filled with drugs and dropped it into the exercise yard. So the first dudes in the morning went out there to go play basketball, and they went over and picked up the right basketball, and of course it was full of drugs. So the sheriff has to go pick up his basketballs every night, so any basketball that's out there in the morning is considered a problem. So again, we'll be bringing an ordinance back to council in the near term, and I want to thank everybody that was involved, especially Laura Zazar from the police department who does some monitoring of this program, and David Bradley's folks who help with this also.
Any questions for Bob? Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, last item for today are the planning items upcoming in September. So Carolyn's going to lead out, and I see Kevin's with him, so we're ready to roll.
Thank you.
Welcome, Carolyn.
Good afternoon. I will give you a quick glimpse of the planning items that we have scheduled for you on September 5th. And then Kevin is here to talk to you about the items scheduled on the 19th. We have a total of 9 items on the 5th, and all but one are recommended for approval by both the staff as well as by the Planning Commission. So item number 1 is a request to rezone a small residentially zoned property from R15 to conditional O2 office district. And the sole purpose of this rezoning is to provide vehicular access from Wolf Snare Road to the office property to the north. Staff is concerned that providing a commercial access between the residentially zoned parcels could have some potential negative impacts to the surrounding neighbors. There was one speaker in opposition at the Planning Commission meeting who noted concerns regarding screening and buffering. And since the Planning Commission meeting, staff worked with the applicant to create a landscape plan that the Public Works Department does agree to conceptually that will allow plantings within the drainage easement that exists along the western portion of the property while protecting the infrastructure that is currently located within this easement. Based on this, the applicant is hopeful that this opposition will be withdrawn, and they have been working closely with the neighbor that did attend the Planning Commission meeting. Since the Planning Commission meeting, also, they have added a proffer that states that if city crews do indeed need to get into that easement to maintain that infrastructure, at the property owner's expense, that plant material will be removed and also replanted. We did receive a letter of support for the request from the property owner immediately to the east. A conditional use permit for motor vehicle sales was approved on this site in 2008, and the applicant has really outgrown this site. So he is proposing to expand. The expansion will include closure of a small portion, about 6,000 square feet of Euclid Road, and the area to be closed is shown in pink on the next slide on the right. There we go. The display area for the vehicles will the display area for the vehicles for sale will be nearly 21,000 square feet. Upgrades to the landscaping and the signage are proposed. No new buildings are with this request, and staff is not aware of any opposition. Item 3 is a request for a subdivision variance in northern Little Neck. This almost 85,000 square foot parcel was platted in 1948, and there is a single family dwelling on the site. The applicant is proposing to subdivide the parcel with, I'm sorry.
That wouldn't be in Bayside.
No, it would not. So the applicant is proposing to subdivide the site into 2 lots. Both of these lots will exceed the minimum requirement for lot area of 40,000 square feet. However, proposed Lot 5B will have just 66 feet of lot width rather than the 25 foot of feet required. So based on this deficiency, a subdivision variance to lot width is requested. Many of the properties in the vicinity are flag lots, and they are oddly shaped due to the fingers of land that protrude out into the Lynn Haven River. Much of the site is within the resource protection area, so the encroachment was reviewed and approved by the Chesapeake Bay Board in April of this year. Item 4 is a request to rezone a 13-acre site owned by Virginia Wesleyan University, and the request is to rezone the property from R15 Residential District to Conditional A24 Apartment District in order to develop the site with up to 252 apartment units. While the proposed housing is not exclusively for the Virginia Wesleyan students, it is anticipated that many of their graduate students will actually live in these apartments. The submitted plan depicts 8 multifamily buildings, a recreation center, and 3 single-story garage buildings. The 5 multifamily buildings will be 4 stories with an approximate height of 52 feet. These taller buildings will be located closer to Wesleyan Drive. The maximum height is 45 feet for buildings in the A24 district, so they will be seeking a deviation to the height requirement. The 3 multifamily buildings closest to the neighborhood are proposed as 3 stories and will be at a height of approximately 41 feet. There were several speakers in opposition at the Planning Commission meeting. They noted concerns related to drainage, the building's locations and heights, as well as screening and buffering. So based on this, the applicant has stated their intention to pull all of the development closer to Wesleyan Drive to create a larger buffer between the single-family dwellings to the north and this development, and also to install a fence along the shared property lines. The applicant has been in continuous conversation with this neighborhood, and they hope to have a letter of support from the Civic League, but we have not seen that yet at this point. This applicant desires to acquire this residentially zoned property and convert the single-family dwelling on the site to an office for his law firm. So specifically, this is a request to rezone a R7.5 property to Conditional O1 Office District. The residential character of the building will remain. They are installing a parking lot where vehicular access will be from North Lynn Haven Road. There are commercial and office uses on either side of the property, and Kings Grant Elementary School is across the street to the north. The more intense uses that are permitted in the O1 district are prohibited as per the submitted proffer agreement, and staff is not aware of any opposition to this item. Most recently, in 2015, City Council approved a conditional use permit for this recreational resort community down in Sandbridge. Condition 2 limits the length of the recreational vehicles and park model trailers to 40 feet. However, the bylaws for the condominium association allow these vehicles to be as long as 45 feet. So this modification will simply align the conditions of the use permit with the terms in the condominium's bylaws. And no opposition to this request has been noted. Item 7 is a request to modify and expand a conditional use permit for housing for seniors within a facility along Shore Drive. In 1996, City Council approved a 72-unit assisted living facility on the western parcel, and now the applicant would like to develop the 6.5-acre eastern piece of their property for additional housing for seniors. The proposal includes a 3-phase development plan that will add an additional 204 units to the site. The submitted elevations depict a 3-story colonial-style building, which is reminiscent of the existing building on the western site. And it will have a maximum of 56 feet in height at its peak. So the maximum height in the R75 district is 35, so a deviation to that height maximum is also requested, and staff is not aware of any opposition. Item 8 is a request for a subdivision variance at 25th Street and Baltic Avenue in the Beach District. This site contains 2 legally non-conforming lots. So under the provisions of the Old Beach District, as well as the provisions of the A24 District, they could, as a matter of right, construct up to 4 units on these 2 parcels. The applicant desires to re-subdivide the 2 lots into 3 lots and then construct 3 single-family dwellings, 1 on each of the new lots. So based on this, subdivision variances to lot area for each of the lots and then lot width for the corner lot are all proposed. And staff is not aware of any opposition to this request. And finally, it wouldn't be a city council meeting without a tattoo parlor request. So this is the last item, which is a conditional use permit for a tattoo parlor. This is going to be within an existing unit in the shopping center at Windsor Oaks Boulevard and Holland Road. And according to the application, the 3,000 square foot unit will be retrofitted with up to 10 workstations, and they'll have up to 10 employees. Other than signage, no changes to the exterior of the building are proposed, and we are not aware of any opposition. Any questions on those items?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So September 19th, we have 7 items on the agenda. The last 2 there are ordinance amendments that I'm really excited about, and I can't wait to tell you about. So let's get started. All right, first item is in the Rose Hall District. It is a conditional use permit for a home occupation, specifically firearm sales. Property is a single family in the Magic Hollow neighborhood. Like many others, this applicant is going for their federal firearms license and needs the city approval to go through that process. Most of the sales will be drop ship. He anticipates only no more than 5 per month. There was no opposition to this request, and Planning Commission and staff recommended approval. The next item is in the Princess Anne District. It is a rezoning from AG2 to R10. If you're familiar, this is a stretch of Seaboard Road between Princess Anne and Nimmo Parkway. And if you know that stretch of road, it is predominantly developed with single-family properties. This is a AG2 property currently, which requires an acre. What they are asking for is a rezone to R10 to develop the sites with 2 single-family homes. The homes will meet all the dimensional requirements of the zoning ordinance. So we heard no opposition, and staff and Planning Commission recommended approval. Third item in the Rose Hall District is a conditional use permit for a car wash and automobile service station. The site is 4.5 acres. It's at the intersection of Warwick and Holland Boulevard. One thing to note, access will be off Warwick and not on Holland. The proposal is for 10 gas pumps and an automated car wash. Hours of operation of the car wash will be 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. This was put in because we have had several issues with other car washes and excessive noise, early in the morning, late at night. Also to note that in the proffers on the out parcel, eating and drinking establishments with drive-through and convenience stores are not permitted. And this was because opposition or concerns from the neighborhood to the north came, and that was to ease their concerns with the application. And Planning Commission and staff recommended approval. The fourth item is a conditional use permit in the Centerville District for motor vehicle rental. What it is, it's an existing gas station, and they would like to have truck rentals on it. So the truck rental parking will be just to the side of the building. It accommodates 4 spaces, so we did condition that no more than 4 box trucks be stored on the site. There was no other changes are proposed, no opposition, and staff and Planning Commission recommended approval. The fifth item is in the Kempsville District, and this is an application to close a approximately 10,500 square foot portion of Lord Dunmore Drive. I will say, when this sign went up, a lot of people thought that we were closing all of Lord Dunmore Drive, and I got a lot of phone calls on this one. But in fact, it is just the portion. If you remember when Princess Anne, that CIP, the old house was moved, and this was part of the agreement that was signed in 2010. The area is currently being used for parking for that office. It will continue. and no changes to the current configuration of Lower Dunmore will take place. So, after I clarified all of that, there was no opposition. Staff and Planning Commission recommended approval. And now we get to the good stuff, the ordinance changes. So this is a change to Section 201 of the zoning ordinance in regard to fences. And what this really does is it provides homeowners the ability for more use of their yard. And I will explain. I have a series of images here. So in our existing ordinance, privacy fence or any fence over 4 feet can only go up to the setback line on a corner lot. And so, if the house as it's sitting there, in most zoning districts, there's 30 feet between the property line and where that fence can be. And that doesn't include the, 10, 15 feet between that point and the city right-of-way or edge of pavement. We did, a few years ago, change it where if the house was non-conforming and was in the setback, you could line it up with the corner of the house and come straight back. And that helped some, but we still were seeing a lot of variance requests and a lot of, telling people they couldn't fence in their backyard. So with this change, it would allow for privacy fences or fences over 4 feet to go within 10 feet of the side corner property line. If the fence is located at 10 feet, consistent with the rest of the ordinance, there would be Category 1 landscaping, but this will open up and allow them to fence in a larger portion of the yard. There are several developments that had PDHs where there is a 10-foot setback for these fences. They haven't caused any visual problems and, really don't have much of an impact. So this would relieve a lot of variance requests, and we're excited about this one. The second part of this request is in regard to sound walls. So our current ordinance, if you have a sound wall in your backyard, that means you have a right-of-way in your backyard. This is a through lot. There are setbacks on through lots, so current privacy fence would have to be set back 10 feet from your property line. As you can see, between where the fence would be and the sound wall, that creates an awkward little area. So what this ordinance would do is give the homeowner two options. Let me go on with our current ordinance even more. Or you could be 5 feet and plant landscaping. So you'd have to plant bushes between the sound barrier and the fence. So now, what this ordinance would do would give the homeowner two options. They could go right up to the rear property line with a privacy fence if they wanted, by right, no issues. The second is that they could continue the fence all the way and connect with the sound wall, which is what a lot of people want to do. Because if you put the fence there, you're creating that alley. And it's a land that you can't, it's tough to keep up with, and it's kind of dead space. So as long as they get proper approvals from Public Works, they can connect directly to that sound wall. And we're really excited about this one. And then last, I'm not quite as excited about this one, but it is a pretty cool ordinance. It's a Ordinance Amendment. It's a simple change. When the sign ordinance got changed a year ago based on the Supreme Court ruling, one number in our ordinance didn't translate over. So in a certain circumstance, industrial properties were limited to 12 square feet of signage, not much. That was supposed to be 40, that's corrected here. But what we also did is work with my sign inspectors and Kay, and we made the ordinance more readable. If you've ever tried to read our sign ordinance, it really goes around one thing to get to the other. It's not very, for a normal person, even myself, it's not very comprehensible. So we reworded it, same requirements, but just easier to read for people picking up the ordinance. This is something we are going to systematically do for all the other zoning districts, but we started with the industrial. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Bob.
Make my statement.
I'm sorry?
Make my statement.
Yes.
I want to say something. Might as well
Right
short.
there, ready? You're staying after.
We've got some comments from city council members here. Bob?
Folks, if I could take the liberty, we have our retreat coming up in a couple months, and I think one of the things I would like to do is bring forward a topic that I've had a lot of passion on since I've been on council since 2004 and probably even before. And let's put it this way, I think we have a public out there on the national, state, and local levels that are kind of skeptical with government right now, and I think we have the obligation to improve our communication and the way we do things with transparency, communication, and, the like, with our public. And, Virginia Beach is a wonderfully run city, but I think like all cities, towns, and hamlets, we run into problems when we come to some public-private ventures, and it creates a lot of emotion with the public. It creates some skepticism with the public. And then the other thing is that we've been confronting with in the city is also the perception of an uneven playing field and, some people getting preferences and things of that like. And I think this is a thing that we have an obligation to address and correct in a way. And once again, I think the idea of what we're going to be trying to do here, and I'm going to tell you that, the language was crafted, in a way to really provoke an honest discussion, a robust discussion on this, and come up with things during the retreat. And please note that I have this listed as a draft resolution that we can think about between now and the upcoming retreat. And, then we can take it from there. And I will be soliciting input from staff, council, and everybody else. And if you could give me the indulgence, allow me to read the resolution. And basically, I think what we need is a clarification on how we do some public-private things. And I think it would just be a good thing to maybe take a time out and really take a look at it, not just to study it, and also to come up with some solutions that will be transparent to the public and help with understanding as we go forward. So I'm proposing a resolution to impose a moratorium on public-private partnerships. And whereas local governments are frequently approached by private developers who seek public financial support for development projects, whereas state laws, including Public-Private Education and Facilities Act of 2002, gap financing legislation, Chapter 643, and 1964 Virginia Acts of Assembly. It's always good to have an attorney help write these things. Which created, among other things, the Virginia Beach Development Authority, authorized governmental entities to engage in public-private partnerships with few statutory safeguards to protect the public's interest, and projects undertaken under those acts, such as tolling the roads and tunnels by private developers, have hurt many taxpaying residents, especially those struggling hardest to make. And even though that's not a Virginia Beach issue, public-privates are a generic issue throughout the country. Whereas public confidence in elected official is eroded by public perceptions that politicians pick winners and losers and provide financial assistances to business entities as form of corporate welfare, and businesses may choose not to locate or expand their localities where businesses often perceive that government favors their competitors and promotes an uneven playing field. Whereas our nation has thrived and become the leader of the industrial world, in large part because of our capitalist system, which tends to work best with government does not give certain businesses an advantage over competitors, but instead encourages a more even playing field whereby private sector businesses succeed or fail on their own merits based on their own efforts and private investment. And whereas they are examples of public-private partnerships in which both private sector and localities and taxpayers realize benefits that possibility might not have otherwise occurred but for the partnership, there are also countless other examples of such partnerships in which certain public-private businesses benefit at the expense of the taxpaying citizen. And whereas a moratorium on public-private partnerships would enable the city to appoint a blue ribbon task force comprised of business leaders, economic and financial experts, and taxpayers, city leaders, and other stakeholders to study the potential benefits and detriments to public-private partnerships for the city, to make recommendations to the city regarding the future city's participation in these public-private partnerships. Now that it be resolved that the City Council hereby directs the city manager to refrain from proposing any new public-private partnership and reject any unsolicited proposals for public-private until such time as the City Councils advise the city manager otherwise. 2, that the city hereby establishes a Virginia Beach Blue Ribbon Task Force on public-private partnerships to members which shall be appointed by the city council. And 3, that the task force shall study the potential benefits, risks, and harms of public-private partnerships on the local level and provide city council with recommendations. And that the city manager shall ensure that task force is properly staffed and the city attorney will make available one or more attorneys with expertise on this matter. And I think also to take it a little farther beyond what's going on with the public-private partnerships is also to make sure that we have a more conducive business climate to get small businesses up and started. Had a very nice lunch with the city manager yesterday. We're moving in a very positive direction in terms of, trying to change us from an adversarial to a advocate relationships going forward. But right now, I think as we go forward, some of these initiatives coming forward really create some confusion and havoc amongst the public. And I think we just have to do a better job at defining ourselves and improve the process. And once again, I'm looking for a good conversation. I told the facilitator this is what I would really like to discuss at the retreat. And I think in the end, what we're looking for is just an improved overall way of doing things. We've been doing a lot of things the same way for how many years? Maybe we can find some other ways that may include more people. This is a hot topic. And I think it's one that if we address in the way that I know we're capable of, we're going to have a very favorable outcome. And thank you for the opportunity to bring this forward.
Rosemary, do you have something?
I just wanted to mention that the Historic Preservation Commission is going to be meeting next week, and they as a group are going to talk about the Confederate Monument. And I don't know that they're going to have any recommendations at that time, but they're going to, as a group, talk about things, and I suggested maybe solicit ideas from the public, but we'll see where it goes.
Okay. Shannon?
I know Bobby and I got this in our packet as the Human Rights Commission liaisons, but I'm not sure if everyone else did or not. If you give me just a moment, I would like to read a letter that Raj is the chairman of the Human Rights Commission, and Teresa Stanley is also a member of that commission, and they sent this letter to City Manager Hampton earlier this week. In light of all the things that are going on, I want to read something a little positive about what's happening in our community. Dear Mr. Hanson, as partners in advocating for the human rights of all, the Human Rights Commission has been actively engaged in conversations throughout our community regarding our city's commitment to be a welcoming city for all. In the many discussions that have taken place, one theme has surfaced time and time again. The Virginia Beach Police Department has striven to act with professionalism, compassion, and with the utmost restraint and dignity in all of their interactions, especially those during College Beach Week. Through our partnerships with the VBPD, we have witnessed firsthand their commitment to being a proactive partner towards building a more transparent and inclusive law enforcement agency that seeks to work with the communities they serve. The effects of their hard work are perhaps best seen in the western Bayside area of the city through their work with the Pastors Leaders Table. This group, made up of pastors, citizens, community leaders, and Virginia Beach Police Department leadership and officers, has been meeting for over 2 years. The initiatives and relationships born out of these meetings have strengthened the community and making our city safer. The VBPD daily accepts the awesome responsibility of placing themselves between our families and dangerous situations, and they willingly face those who seek to do harm so that our community can rest easy at night. We ask much of this group of men and women. They are constantly challenged to be stronger, learn faster, be more, and to adapt with the ever-changing landscape of threats that face our city. Much of the police department's efforts are overshadowed by the next headline, our most recent turmoil, and these brave officers face an almost constant barrage of complaints for things that all too often are beyond their control. We ask our police to solve social issues that we ourselves are able to tackle. We look to them as the answer, but then fail to provide the support and resources needed to put our demands into action. But they continue on serving and protecting regardless of whether we lend our support or give our thanks. On behalf of the Human Rights Commission, in partnership with the Pastors Leaders Table, we would like to express our deepest gratitude for the acts of service provided to our citizens and guests every day. We thank the Police Department for being willing to put their lives on the line and protect all members of our community, including those who scream words of anger, threaten violence, or antagonize them in the uniform they wear. It is because of their professionalism, their desire to serve with quiet dignity, and an unswerving dedication to their sworn duties that we can call this the greatest city in the world. It is our sincere hope that the city leadership will join us in acknowledging one of our city's most valuable resources, the Virginia Beach Police Department. Signed sincerely, Raj Islam, Chairman of the Human Rights Commission, and Teresa Stanley, the founding member of Pastors Leaders Roundtable. Thank you for letting me read that.
Thank you. Yes, Bill?
Bob, I've just got to respond to this. I look forward to carrying on the conversation in the retreat, and I appreciate the phone call this afternoon, but public-private partnerships are used in every city in the United States. So essentially what you're asking us to do is tie one hand behind our back in terms of economic development. I don't know of a single business that has chosen not to locate or expand in the city of Virginia Beach because of public-private partnerships. I guess they wouldn't choose to expand in any city in the United States under that conventional wisdom. I'll be happy to work with you on this, but we'll talk about it more at the retreat.
If I could just say one thing, and Ben, I appreciate it, and that's why we're talking about this. And I think it's the type of thing is that, feeling the frustration and, dealing with the thing, our process improvement team, we took a look at, some of the frustrations with the planning department and some of the other things about the frustrations of starting a business in small business here. And the thing is, whether we like it or not, we live in a theater of perceptions. And when we see certain developers seemingly getting everything, and other people have to jump through incredible hoops, almost like getting a root canal without anesthesia in terms of getting their businesses and open and everything. I think the outcome I'm looking for, and I hope we are looking for, is that equal level playing field that tells everybody to come here for business. Just the other day, Jim Wood, brought out that he knows some businesses that, didn't want to do business with the city of Virginia Beach. And now some of this is grounded in reality, but I think much of it is grounded in perception. So the point is, we got a problem. Let's fix it. Let's get together and fix it. And I'm looking forward to working with you and everybody else on it.
And I would just add to that, I disagree that there is a problem.
John?
Well, on a different topic, there's time for robust discussion on that.
Well, wait a minute.
I was waiting for it.
Wait a minute. Did you want to speak on that?
Since you brought it back up, and since Ben brought it back up, I had a lot of concerns, and I mentioned some of it last week at the time of the vote, after that first public hearing, to the point that, I asked for a verbatim. And the thing was that so many of the folks that spoke came up and said, I'm here to register my opposition to incentives for private development. I think I think there's a lot of misperception, and I think we're furthering that when we state some of these things that are stated in this resolution, because I don't think they're quite accurate. But I had asked for, from Warren Harris, some background on what we do and have done with incentives. Going back to 1994, when we developed the Virginia Beach Economic Development Incentive Program, or investment program, it says here, but I think it's incentive, EDIP, which we've been doing since 1994, and then the public-private partnership economic development policy that was developed in, I think, 2001, and then we actually did this very thing 2 years ago when we stopped having any more of these incentives for a time for us to examine what we did, and I think it was on December 8th of 2015 that we readopted, after looking at it and having a moratorium, we readopted the evaluation of economic development investment partnerships, and we had made a few adjustments in here and updated the policy. I think it really comes down to a philosophy, an individual philosophy. We're either for them or against them. But when we look at just the EDIP that we have done since 2004, and there's 5.5 pages of these because they listed out for me all of them that they had done. These actually are from the general fund. These actually are grants, and I think it's been widely accepted and very successful. Some of them are small companies, some of them are large companies, but we have a policy, and it's, if people qualify, they do it, and if they don't, they don't. But it's available for everybody, and that's the way we have to with this, these other public-private partnerships we do. And I think possibly part of the thing is that we have gone out and created this misperception. And it really gave me a lot of concern with all that we went through with the recent one that we dealt with last week. And I've got to think that if people who invest in our city feel like they're going to have to go through that kind of thing, they may just not be willing to invest in our city. And I hate to send that kind of message out to people, that we're just going to make it even harder for people to come and provide jobs and make investments in the city. But if we're going to look at it, then we've got to look at all of it, beginning with EDIP and the whole thing. And I really hate to have a moratorium on that because I think it is very successful.
Wait a minute, John's before you.
Well, she's talking about that topic. Mine
Okay.
is separate. I don't want to interfere with the flow.
And I said this to Bobby when he called me. I guess the word that, and I haven't really had time to digest all of this, but the word that really jumps out at me is the moratorium, because we have things that are in the pipeline that we're currently working on, and I don't think it would be fair to any of that to say, oops, we're stopping this, and there's things that you're quite aware of that would be kind of disastrous if we stop them and say.
Well, as you say, we've got some that we've already led to believe that we're willing to work with them and we're talking to them and they're in the process. It'd be kind of difficult to cut them off.
It's some pretty good stuff. So I think moratorium is a really bad choice of words to be having in this. And I do think that maybe there's some things that we ought to be looking at that maybe we didn't, and maybe we can look at some different things. And I don't think today is the time to have that decision. But I think moratorium is a really poor choice of words of what we've got going on.
If I could just, real quick, first of all, I did call the mayor, I did interrupt his vacation, okay? Just a thing, and he did say that in progress, they're looking at all public-private partnerships to find out, just to find out the merits of them. So that's already in progress. And the thing is, my concern, Rosemary, like I said, the words were designed to provoke a discussion, a robust discussion on this. And what I didn't want the public to think that this is going to be another one of those meaningless studies that's going to go sit on a shelf somewhere. And the point is, though, if we're serious about it, and we'll determine that, September 12th. By putting the caution flag up a little bit on these, we'll send a message to the public that, we're serious. This is not going to be a meaningless exercise. Thank you.
John?
I didn't come prepared to talk about that topic, so I like to be prepared and reasoned in my remarks, so I'm going to pass today on that. Instead, talk about a meeting that Councilwoman Kane and I had, along with the city manager, with the Virginia Beach Development Corporation. We did meet with them 2 Tuesdays back. We are working on something. It might be about 45 to 60 days. We're going to kind of bring something back, but we told you we were going to come back about what we think should be the future framework and the future relationship and how that should work and their role in the city. We had a great, candid, and frank conversation, I would say, that Tuesday evening, about 2 hours. It was very productive. Thank the city staff that was there, Ron and the city attorney that was there, I forget who was Dana, I believe. But it was very good, and we'll be bringing that back. But I want to let you know that that did take place, and it was very productive.
Anybody else? All right, I have a comment. You folks ruined my record of ending meetings on this.
Yeah, Will's not going to let you.
Meeting's adjourned.